by Timbers General Manager Ned Grabavoy. Ned, if you can start us off with just your general thoughts on starting the 2024 MLS season.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Paloma, and thanks to everybody for being here. It's hard to know if that offseason went by slow or fast. Certainly there was a lot that we needed to accomplish. Feel good about where we're at within that plan with one last big thing to get over the line. And I know on behalf of myself and so many people at the club, we couldn't be more excited to get the 2024 season underway, and what better way to do that than at Providence Park. So with that, thank you for being here, and I'll open it up to the room.
Go ahead.
You mentioned that one last big thing. Is that something that's going to be before the season opener on Saturday?
If I was to give it a timeline right now, I would say we're in position hopefully within the next 7 to 10 days. Looking at that with the start of the season, it's also probably a player, hopefully, that we'll be able to get in quickly once we have things finalized.
John, go ahead.
Piggyback out of that one, it's that at number 9.
It's an attacking player. We're looking at 3 players, and we're prioritizing one at the moment. Having said that, we think that all the players that we've looked at have the ability to give us some different looks. But it is a goal scorer. It is a player that adds a different component and a dangerous component to our attack, and it's one that we're excited about.
You mentioned before probably working on a left back. Is that something that you expect to happen before the end of this window, or probably you're going to start the season and see what happens looking at the summer?
I think if you take a look at the current roster composition, right, and that's projecting, obviously adding a big-time designated player into it. Some of the change that we had in the offseason was to some of the supplemental roster slots and some of the younger players that we've had. We'll continue to assess and reassess how to add, young players into our group. That's both here from our academy, from our second team, and from elsewhere. And so there's a few positions in which we would, target to look at players to provide some cover and give us, potential, long-term players that can contribute to the roster as well.
Alex, go ahead.
You mentioned the DP and a couple more signings. What are your plans for the summer window? Obviously, you guys have another DP slot available as well. Just wanted to get your thoughts on what your plan is for transfers in the summer as well.
Yeah, I've got to clarify the 2 DP slot. With our current roster, we only have the ability to add 1 DP. With where we're at, I think as we go forward, the roster is a living and breathing thing. It's continuing to evolve. We've got a new head coach that's now had the ability to not just talk about players in a room with me for 2 months and listen to my opinions. He's now had a chance to work with these players, to work with other coaches, to work with other staff. It's really important, and a big part of our process this offseason was, myself, Phil, and some other staff having the ability to be together, to be collaborative, to be aligned. I think it's really important to have that. I know the discussions that I've had with Phil, he feels good about where we're at. He feels good about the potential acquisition of that designated player as well. And then from there, we have to continue to see, where the roster goes.
Jeremy, go ahead.
Hi. What is the situation with the U22 initiative players on the roster, given that Santiago Moreno and Juan Mosquera both signed contract extensions recently?
Yeah, so we currently have 3 players on the roster occupying those U22 slots. Those 3 players are Santiago Moreno, Anthony, and David Ayala. We felt like we were in a position with Juan Mosquera to cycle him out of one of those U22 slots. We did that last season when we brought in Anthony so that we could be compliant. Some of it for us, the strategy with U22 players, the hopes are, 2 things. If we could get one of the 2, we're in a good position. 1, can we add quality starting players to the roster that can be here in Portland for the next 4, 5, 6 years, help us compete and help us win? Or do these players do so well that at some point we can no longer retain them and we potentially look to sell those players on? We've had interest in a number of those players. Juan is one, given his, inclusion with the Colombian national team that's continued to gain interest from abroad. So we need those players to continue to do well for us moving forward, and it opens up the doors for both sides.
And one last question. Were there any significant bids that you had to turn down during this winter window for any players currently on the roster?
Significant bids that we received this offseason, we did receive an offer for Evander. I would say it was closer to being in line to what we had paid, from obviously a very prominent club that I think was publicized already. We've had great conversations with Evander. It's not easy. That's a big, big club, and one that he's known for a long time. He's back. He's focused. If anyone's paid attention to training, he's extremely fit and hungry and motivated to do well. This is a big season for him. It's a really big season for us, and he's going to play a big role in that.
Adam, go ahead.
Obviously, Kamal Miller was a big signing. What about his game? Was cohesive to bringing him into the Portland Timbers?
Yeah, there's some familiarity there with Phil as well, and the head coach. I also think Kamal, he gives us another very good defensive player, but different than the players that we have. Left-footed, gives us the ability, I think, to be a bit, calmer and more composed as we build out of the back. I think a lot of this preseason, and I'll let Phil speak on it as well. I'm sure he's tried to look at partnerships and pairings in some of the different positions to see what he thinks is best. But I definitely think that there was a big attraction to a few additions that we made. Players that have experience within MLS can walk into our team, walk into our group. They know the league, they know the competition, they know the travel, they know how strenuous that long MLS season can be. Really happy with the addition of Kamal and obviously Max as well.
John, go ahead.
Two names. Is Harvey staying with the club?
Good question. So with Harvey, obviously he's under contract with Inter Miami, but the conversations and discussions with them were to allow him to train here. Some of it for Harvey the last 6 weeks or so has also been, for him to continue to look at what's best for him and his next step of his career. There's been conversations, obviously with Phil, but within our group. Does that make sense for him to potentially be here in some capacity? Are there other opportunities that maybe make more sense, for him going forward? It's a unique situation in some ways, given that he's still under contract with Inter Miami. But I think on that one, there'll probably be clarity pretty soon.
And the situation with Ivicic?
Yes, Ivicic is still under contract with us. We have tried to continue this offseason to work with both him and his representation to find a different solution, which would obviously involve the player not being in Portland. We've continued to do that. That is another situation I would say that there's probably going to be clarity, and I think we'll come to a resolution in the very near future.
Tyson, go ahead.
You talked about kind of some of the conversations that you and Phil have had over the last couple of weeks and kind of probably learning how to work together in that sense. How has your guys' relationship evolved since kind of the hiring and since he's moved here and it's been full-time?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's also it's a new experience, for myself in my role, and you go through that process, of interviewing and the amount of time, that you spend with that person. And then ultimately the person shows up, they're in the building, and they start to go and operate. I've loved every second of my interactions and my collaboration with Phil since he's gotten here. He is very routine oriented. He is very direct. He gets about his business. And for me, I think there's been an uplifting in the building as well of having him around. And he's been a very, very good communicator on many levels to a lot of different staff. And I know right now there's an excitement in the building with some of the additions and changes that we've had, both in the staff and both within the roster this offseason.
Felipe, did you have one?
How you doing, sir?
Hi.
I see in your face a lot of positivity. What you are giving to the room is of someone that is very positive of what is to come this season. So what are your expectations for this season? Because what you're letting us know is that you're looking forward for this to start.
Well, that's great that you think I've got such a bubbly personality. I don't think I get that one often. I would also, put some caution there. This is the time of year as well in preseason where a lot of teams feel really, really good about what they're doing. I think my positivity and my messaging is we had a very clear plan this offseason, and I've been at the club for a long time. We are extremely close to executing on just about everything that we wanted to this offseason. So for me, I'm positive about the plan that's gone into place. Now, we've also spoken in the past about those things needing to add up, to something in the end. And we need to see that this year. We need to see those results. But for me, and I think for so many others at the club, the reason why I'm positive as well is that 6 months, 4 months, you're locked away in a room and in an office and you have meetings and discussions and Zoom calls and you go through everything. the beauty of the job, the reason why you get up and do it every day is to show up at Providence Park on a Saturday night and see the supporters and see the fans and see their hope and their belief as well. And I think so much of the hard work and the dedication of all the staff that are in the building and so much support staff that don't have a chance to sit up here and give messaging that play a big role at the club, that's also their passion, you know, and the hope is that we can show fans this season, give fans something to be proud of. There'll be some work to do. We know how MLS seasons can go. We've got a new head coach, but I think we all firmly believe in him, and I think we'll have it going in a positive direction.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's obviously controversy surrounding the tournament. To your understanding, do the Portland Timbers want to continue to participate in the U.S. Open Cup?
Good question. You know, some of that I would defer right now to MLS and to U.S. Soccer. U.S. Soccer obviously owns the tournament. I think you could probably poll and speak to 100 different GMs and 100 different coaches. Look, it's a prestigious tournament that has a great amount of history. I think any tournament that we're in, regardless of who's playing, regardless of how old or young those players are, how expensive they were, or how inexpensive they were, we're going to compete to win. And that's a lot of what Phil's about as well. And so I wouldn't doubt it for a second. I think we have to see how some of that settles, you know, and what's to come from it. There are challenges now, you know, when you look at the congestion, you look at the addition of Leagues Cup as well. It does present probably different challenges that also existed years ago.
Fletcher?
What, as you look in your role specifically, to get where you want to go and achieve the things that this club wants to achieve this season, starting Saturday and running, obviously, hopefully through the end of, or middle of December, right? What has to happen to achieve those goals?
Well, I think a lot of it this offseason and looking at this, and I've had a chance to communicate this internally and, you know, part of it now. And, you know, for me personally, I always look in the mirror first and foremost. You know, I always try and take accountability, and I've had the time this offseason to also reflect. You know, when you're going and you're moving forward, there's times where you think you're doing everything a certain way or the right way. Sometimes it's time, it's experience, it's learning. I think looking back on last season, there's plenty of things to learn from as well. I think it's using those experiences, trying to grow as a person, you know, in my position and as a leader as well, along with Phil. And the goal is to get the most out of every single player and every single staff member. We've got really, really good people here. We always have. We've made some really strong additions to the group. And like I said, I know that everyone's really excited to get the season going.
We'll do 2 more in the room before we go on Zoom. Rocky?
Hi.
Good to see you. Just wanted to actually follow up on something Merritt told me a few weeks ago, which was the next 2 signings are going to be the biggest signings the club's ever seen. Well, I want to kind of go on the accuracy or maybe the numbers on that, if they're close to a vendor or not.
I think what I would say is we've been given an incredible amount of support, you know, from the owner to go out and make, you know, the best addition that we believe is the right fit for our group and for our team. The challenging thing as you go and you look to add players at this level and the amount of investment that goes into it is you've got all these players with different skill sets. For us, there's a huge focus as well right now on the character and the personality within that acquisition. We feel like it's someone that can come into our group, command a lot of respect from players and staff given the level that they've played at. So while I would sit here and say, do I have a budget? I have a budget, of course, but at the same time, what I would say is that budget's been put in place to give us the ability to make a really, really good addition.
John?
So John, you mentioned that Juan was having some kind of interest. At any point, that interest turned into a real offer, or was just interest, people asking about his situation?
Just a lot of questions. You know, a lot of you know, different clubs obviously have been tracking and monitoring his progress. Sometimes when you look, it's no different from when we're looking at young players as well. You know, we made a decision to sign Juan, and you try to look at a body of work, but the body of work for an 18 or 19-year-old sometimes is 20 professional games. It makes it a real challenge to try to pinpoint which players you sort of want to bet on. I think with Juan, you've got a player that came in and he's had 1 season here in MLS. I think the teams that are probably tracking and monitoring him are looking to see if he can build on that. If he starts to sort of transcend and go, I think that's when we'll see something. And for us, we've always sort of pinpointed summer as being probably a pretty active window for him in terms of conversations with clubs from abroad.
Now, you were a player obviously show you a way different aspect of the league, right? And the evolution of the league. You know how hard it is to turn rosters around in this league. You can call this one your team now?
Yeah, I think it's getting there, and I think part of the decision last year to make a big decision and a coaching change was also to help get the new head coach on board so that he could have more of a say as well, and there could be that alignment, going into the offseason. And we can talk about the additions and the players and the potential DP. There are some other bigger changes that needed to be made. We're talking about an open DP slot only because we had the ability to essentially transfer Yimi Chara, which was unique and certainly not an easy thing for us to pull off. It's at least opened some doors for us to make some of those changes, and hopefully those additions that we make are strong. And for me, I'd like to get back to a place where we're not talking about missing the playoffs, and we're talking about being in the playoffs for 3, 4, 5 years in a row, and hopefully, contending towards the top of the conference. That's the goal, and I'm hopeful that we can realize that.
All right, we'll move into questions on Zoom. Sam Zviller.
Hi, Ned. You just kind of talked a little bit about goals and the team moving in the right direction. Sorry, can y'all hear me?
Sam, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sorry, can y'all hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great. Then you're talking a little bit about goals, kind of consistency, trying to be towards that middle and top of the conference. In your eyes, what are the steps of progress? Like, what are those keys that you're hoping to see from this group, particularly in the early season, to kind of feel like the group is moving towards that consistency and is moving towards in that right direction?
Yeah, I think I'll try and break that question down into two different parts. I think some of it for us this offseason with the plan, we had put in place is, to try and focus on how can we make a few of those additions and acquisitions of players that we felt like, really helped drive the level and the top end part of that. I think, in adding players like Kamal and Max, and hopefully adding a DP over the next week or so, we've added 3 really, really quality players. All with experience, all that can help sort of drive that top level. I think we've always felt good about some of the depth that we've had in different positions. I do think we've had a stronger roster than maybe the results have shown over the past year. And then from there, getting into the consistency, look, it is without tempering expectations, it is a new coach. He's needed time in preseason to assess players and personalities and how things work, including some of the new players as well. I do see some of that probably continuing into the beginning part of the year. And then I think in MLS, you're always going to work off of some variation. You have to have some flexibility in the way that you play based on personnel. But you do need to hone in on that consistency, your on-field product, how you're going to play, how you're going to operate. And that's hopefully where you get a sense that results will hopefully match that part of it.
Sam.
And one quick follow-up. You mentioned kind of some of those depth pieces. Are there any other additional signings that we can expect within the next week or two here? I know you referenced the potential DP signing in the next 7 to 10 days. Any other signings into the supplemental roster spots in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think outside of the DP acquisition, the only other signings that we would look to make as a club right now would probably be younger players that would slot into roster slots, 25 to 30. As I had said before, there's a few positions, and we'll look, which we'll look to highlight in terms of providing the team more depth. But I think we can also be a little bit patient with some of those as well.
All right, we'll wrap it there. Thank you, Ned, for the time.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody.